gets that a lot, but no one messes up Pretzel. So you're one of the scientists? I am, he says proudly, taking off his helmet and resting it on a nearby boulder. His wispy hair is a mess and matted down with sweat, making it look as though he's just finished running a marathon. I know stereotypes are misleading, but I was expecting lab coats and reading glasses, the rectangular kind that instantly make someone look more intelligent. If I bumped into Pretzel in a crowd, I'd think he was retired, or perhaps worked as a reporter, maybe an editor at some newspaper, as he's got that kind of gravitas about him. Garcia says, Pretzel's been looking for intelligent life in outer space for over 50 years. To which he replies, because there sure as hell ain't any down here. Both men laugh, and I get the feeling this is a common retort. Lieutenant Jackson barks orders at one of the soldiers on the other side of the crate, and Garcia jumps to his feet, expecting to be scolded as well. Pretzel doesn't seem fazed by the lieutenant's gruff demeanor. In his distinctly irreverent Indian accent, he tells me, "Don't worry about him. He's a jackass." Jackson heard that. That much is clear from the way the lieutenant's head pricks up as he wheels around to face us. What was that? What did you say? It's not hard to see there's history between them. Lieutenant Jackson is incensed. Pretzel is surprisingly relaxed, given he's just been caught cursing at a U.S. Navy SEAL. I was just telling the kid, he says, taking his time, waving with his hand and refusing to be intimidated by the lieutenant. If he needs anything. Again he pauses, forcing Jackson to wait for his reply. The lieutenant is impatient, seething inside, but the aging Indian scientist speaks slowly, enunciating carefully as he says, "Just ask." Jackson isn't impressed. The lieutenant heard exactly what was said, but he doesn't challenge Pretzel. Rather, he turns away, pointing at several soldiers erecting a tent and barking orders at them. He flinches slightly as Pretzel hisses, adding a single word spoken with deliberation. "Jackass." Garcia raises an eyebrow, looking at me to see if I followed what just happened. Oh yeah, I got it. I can't wait till Pretzel meets my dad. I'm going to need popcorn. Lots of popcorn. Pretzel turns to me. "You need anything, kid?" "Me?" I shake my head, offering an emphatic no. I'm still not sure how I ended up in the middle of all this. Well, I finish his sentence for him. "Just ask, right?" Ha ha. I like you, kid. Come on. Garcia gestures for me to walk with him. We make our way to the grounds around the church. As the compound is largely free of trees, the church lawn is used for markets on the weekend, and is ideal for the scientists and soldiers setting up camp. So, Pretzel? Yeah, he's quite the character, huh? He's been working with the Rapid Deployment Team for decades. Don't be fooled by his appearance. He has a PhD in physics and astrobiology, and is on the board of directors governing this mission. But he and the lieutenant don't see eye to eye. Technically, they're equals. In practice, Lieutenant Jackson has operational command, while Pretzel's over the scientific team. We do a lot of training exercises, coordinating with NASA and ESA, preparing for precisely this kind of scenario. A couple of years ago, when we were first assigned a support role with the contact team, Lieutenant Jackson thought Pretzel was a Sherpa during an exercise in the Himalayas and tried to order him around. Try being the optimal word. There's been friction ever since. No kidding. Come on, I'll introduce you to the crew. We walk past soldiers setting up vast bubble-shaped tents without a center pole. They're surprisingly spacious inside, with vast flaps that open like doorways, allowing scientists to move in equipment from all four sides at once. What are they like? I ask. The aliens? No one knows. But there's been no hostility, so we're assuming they're good. There it is again. Oversimplifications about good and evil. But after 4 years in the jungle, I know there's no such distinction. As the villagers say, twilight never ends. The night just gets darker. What's good is often subjective. Good for me might be bad for Yana. Good for her and me might be bad for the tribe, the village, or the jungle. I hope Garcia's right, but I have my doubts. And they're coming here? Dumb question, I guess, as there's no other reason for soldiers to drop out of the sky. It seems strange to me, crazy, that aliens would want to come to my tiny village in the middle of the jungle. Aren't they supposed to go to the White House? Or attack buildings in New York or something? Garcia laughs. Haven't you heard? They're lowering a rope. A cable. A rope? From where? My eyes look up into the clear blue sky, not understanding how that's possible. From space. But won't it fall down? Nope. What holds it up? I don't know, but the scientists say it's advanced engineering, not magic. That's mad. Yeah, crazy, huh? They tell me it's like having an elevator in a building. Only there's no building, and this elevator reaches 30-odd thousand kilometers into space. If it fell, it would wrap around the entire planet. Wow. So what's stopping it from falling? Ask Pretzel. As an afterthought, he points at the sky and adds, or them. So there are no spaceships? No flying saucers? Just a rope? I guess. Several civilians work on setting up a satellite dish outside the church. Pretzel unfolds a solar panel, locking it onto a stand and angling it toward the sun. He activates a tiny motor at its base, allowing it to track the motion of the sun over the course of the day. Garcia points. See those guys? They're scientists from the NASA-ESA First Contact Group, Pretzel's team. I'm a little nervous around Pretzel, which is strange considering he's overly friendly and outspoken. Soldiers mill around, brandishing rifles. Somewhere overhead, an alien rope ladder is being lowered from the clear blue sky, and I'm intimidated by a 5'6" aging Indian scientist. Hilarious, really. Lieutenant Jackson waves Garcia over, no doubt with an assignment. The two men talk, point, nod, and agree on something. Garcia jogs back. Your dad isn't happy. No, he wouldn't be. He's arranging to evacuate the villagers to Ubandi. I nod, knowing what's coming next. I'm not dumb. With all the assignments the lieutenant's been barking out at various soldiers, it's kind of obvious that Garcia's not being given one because he's already on one, babysitting the white boy. I'm supposed to keep an eye on you until he gets back. Then you guys are heading up to Kisangani. Yep, there it is. As friendly as Garcia is, his interest is in a job, not the teenaged son of a missionary. I don't hold it against him. I always knew all this was leading somewhere, and apparently that somewhere is Kisangani, about 50 miles from here. So we won't get to see them land? Oh, you'll get the best view of all. You'll get to see it all on TV from some nice, cushy hotel lounge. Me? I'll be crouching behind a tree, scratching at insect bites, staying the hell out of sight. I feel a little disappointed, betrayed almost. This is my home. I don't want to leave. Being forced to evacuate seems wrong. Before I can say anything, Pretzel storms over. He's not happy. He drags another scientist in his wake, pointing at me. I'm telling you, it's too high. You want proof? Here's your proof. I step back a little as the other man counters, but the background radiation is barely 12 Roentgen. It's hardly significant. Josh, can I have some of your hair? I knew Pretzel was a little eccentric, but I had no idea. Yeah, sure. My mouth may say those words, but my heart doesn't believe them. I don't know what I'm actually agreeing to. Pretzel leans in, grabbing a single strand by the root and plucking it. "Test this," he says, handing the strand to the other scientist. I'm baffled. "I don't understand." Pretzel ignores my question, instead asking me, "How long have you been here?" Just on 4 years." "Perfect. Josh is a perfect sample. 4 years' worth of accumulated protein, capturing the impact of any background radiation. And don't give me any bullshit about radon buildup. We're in the middle of a goddamn jungle. There's a reason they're coming down here, and it's not to collect autographs. We can't ignore the possibility they're after heavy metals." The other man wanders off, holding the strand of hair as though it were some prized specimen. I'm confused. Pretzel goes from annoyed to friendly in a heartbeat, which is just as bewildering to me. "Hey, don't worry about anything. You're fine. You're giving us a baseline, that's all." I must look worried. Hair is like one of those old-fashioned tape recorders. Every day it grows a little. Every day it tells us a little more about what you've been exposed to. Things in your diet, radiation around you, isotopes integrating into various molecules. It lets us understand what's normal for the jungle. Oh, I didn't understand any of that. "Hey, Pretzel, tell them about the rope ladder." Garcia points at the clear blue sky. "Oh, that? Yeah, that's clever. Our alien friends are smart. You see, getting on and off Earth takes a lot of energy, a hell of a lot. Most of our rockets have a payload ratio of around 3 or 4%, so 96% of any rocket is fuel and engines. Big rocket, little capsule at the top, right? Lots of waste. So these guys are smart. Instead of flying down here, they're setting up an elevator. That's why they captured the asteroid. They're mining it to build the elevator cable, saving themselves a lot of effort. The ratio of what they can transport up and down from Earth will be pretty much the opposite of what they use for spaceflight. They'll be able to shuttle stuff to and from orbit with remarkable efficiency. I nod. Smart. At least, it sounds smart to me. I can't figure out how the rope is going to stay up if it's not attached to something like a tree or a cliff. Yup. Why waste fuel flying back and forth when you can just drop a ladder? Pretzel wanders off, talking to someone else. He's like a whirlwind in the desert, dragging tumbleweeds along behind him. Garcia and I help set up the tents, unraveling nylon sheets and laying out poles, but I'm intensely interested in Pretzel and the other scientists. They unpack computers and various pieces of equipment, run cables along the ground, and build impromptu tables out of crates and planks of wood. Yana holds up what looks like a meter-long ruler, resting it on a large boulder in the center of the village. Pretzel peers through what seems to be a telescope mounted on a tripod, while another scientist sprays red paint on the tip of the rock. "I want a few more datum points." Pretzel points at a couple of other boulders, one of which lies near the parsonage. The other scientist working with Yana is elderly. She has thin gray hair and wrinkled cheeks. I notice a few of the natives staring at her, mesmerized by her pale skin, as though they've seen a ghost. People don't grow old in the jungle. Life here is too harsh. Garcia and I unpack a crate, placing radio equipment and a variety of computer monitors on one of the impromptu desks inside the main tent. "Hey, Garcia says, which to me seems to be a leading question suggestive of what's coming next. I feel as though I can guess what he's going to ask. "Are there, like, long drops around here? You know, where do the villagers go for number 2? "Ah," I reply as we stand by a tent flap. There are squat toilets over there, but you can use our toilet. Garcia's eyes narrow. It's, a regular toilet? Yeah. A regular flushing toilet? Yeah. His brow furrows. How? We have a rainwater tank, and there's toilet paper? Seems like an odd question, but yes. Oh, Josh, you're a legend. I must look confused as Garcia elaborates. For the past few months, I've been shitting into plastic bags and carrying that stuff around with me while on operations in the Middle East. You poop into plastic bags? I ask, trying to hide my surprise, but not quite making it, as my words are a little shrill. The places we go, no one can know we were there, so yeah. We normally do crazy stuff like that to avoid leaving any sign. A toilet, though. A real goddamn toilet. That's gold. There's nothing like taking a good shit. I can't help but laugh. I'm not sure I agree with him on that point, but then again, I haven't had to squat down and poop into tiny plastic bags. But we've got to keep this from Lieutenant Jackson, okay? I don't know why it needs to be a secret, but sure. Garcia peers out of the tent, looking either way, probably trying to spot the lieutenant. I point. Go in the back door. First on the left. Be right back, he says, and he darts over behind the manse as though he's on some super-secret mission. As for me, I don't know that I've ever talked about pooping with anyone before. Not sure I ever will again. With nothing else to do, I join Yana as she sets up the meter ruler on another rock. Hold it just there. Pretzel notes something on a computer tablet. Mark 487.18 meters. Another scientist replies, got it, 487.18. I'm surprised by the amount of equipment the scientists have. There are several satellite dishes clamped onto the side of trees, all pointing in different directions, but they're smaller than Raka's and probably not used for watching television. Is this your friend Josh? The older woman asks Yana, offering her hand to me in friendship. We shake as Yana says, yes. Nice to meet you, Josh. I'm Dr. Angela O'Brien. Hi, Dr. O'Brien, I say, unsure why I'm suddenly a celebrity. Angela, please. No formalities in the jungle. Yana is excited. They want to see the caves. The caves? We're not supposed to go to the caves, even though they're near the local swimming hole. Yana and I like to sneak off exploring, but if my dad knew I'd been there, he'd ground me for a month. Bats roost in the caves north of the village. They're known to carry diseases like Ebola and viruses like Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. Dad had me memorize the names and the symptoms in case any of the villagers become infected. One scratch, just some guano getting into a cut, or even simply touching your nose, mouth, or eyes with unwashed hands, and wham, you're dead. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but it's what Dad says, and it's a pretty damn effective way to make me paranoid. I don't know why we sneak away there. Defiance, I guess, the exhilaration of dicing with death and feeling alive. I'm always a little nervous on return to the village, wondering if a sniffle is something more. Why do it? If Dad knew, he'd scold me for being illogical, stupid. He'd say, Yana's a bad influence. But we just want to be ourselves and not controlled by someone else, constantly being told what to do and how to think. Even my dad's guilty of that, running off to the African jungle. He wasn't sent here. He chose to come here when everyone told him it was madness. Is that why he came? To prove them wrong? Perhaps that same rebellious streak runs in me. Why do you want to go there? I asked the scientist. Visiting bats is about as far removed from greeting aliens as anyone could get. Angela gestures to Pretzel as he walks over. Ask him. Going to the caves is his idea. There's something regal in the way Pretzel walks and talks. His voice has gravitas, while his soft Indian accent lends an air of mystique to his words, making it seem as though he's imparting ancient secrets. Pretzel picks up on the conversation, saying, "I would love to see your caves." Angela clarifies, "My team is part of the Earth Sciences Division at ESA. Our job is to monitor the jungle during first contact to ensure there are no unintended adverse effects." Yana beats me to the obvious question, "So you don't get to talk to the aliens?" She laughs, pointing at Pretzel. "Him, maybe, but not me." Pretzel says, "No one will be talking to anyone at first, not straight away. Honestly, at this point, we don't even know what talking will involve. Speech, sign language, music, strobe lights." Angela elaborates. "My role is to observe what happens on Earth during first contact. We know nothing about the biology of our visitors. We don't know how our world will react to them at a cellular level." Yana and I are silent. Angela pauses. I suspect she'd be happy to leave the explanation at that, but we're clearly fascinated. "You've both seen movies like this, right?" We nod. "Well, this won't be anything like what you've seen in Hollywood. Forget everything you've seen on TV. There won't be any dashing heroes or aliens with acid for blood." My mind wanders. We don't have movie theaters in the jungle, but Raka gets films on DVD, so I know what she means. Mostly they're copies of a copy of a copy, so the quality is poor. But often that makes scary movies even more terrifying, as we can't quite see what's happening. Raka doesn't like too much horror. Most of the movies he has are old and often quite simple. Star Wars is a favorite because it's one of the few movies he has an original copy of, so it's high quality. There's something surreal about watching stormtroopers and Jedi running through an astonishingly clean, sterile spaceship. Wouldn't happen in the jungle. Lightsabers and blasters, spaceships and robots are all somewhat hypnotic to look at. It's the clearly defined lines, the clean-cut images that cast a spell over us. In the jungle, everything's dirty. There's always humidity in the air. Nothing's ever really dry. So seeing worlds like Tatooine, with its crisp desert sands, or Hoth, with its pristine ice, holds an almost magnetic appeal. To hear Angela say, "Forget all that," is surprising, as the allure is overwhelming. If aliens aren't like that, I'm at a loss as to what they could be like. "We live in a microbial world." Pretzel waves his arm toward the jungle. "All of this is an illusion. Trees, monkeys, snakes, centipedes, birds. None of that is real in itself. Every animal is a hodgepodge of individual cells, a collection of trillions upon trillions of microscopic life forms that combine like Lego blocks to form living creatures like you and me. Imagine a house made from Lego. Blue Lego stairs, red Lego chairs, yellow Lego beds and benches. That's us. We are that house. You, me, the jungle, even the air we breathe. It's all an assortment of tiny living cells." Yana is taken back by the concept. "Even the air?" "Even the air. With each breath, you're inhaling roughly 100,000 viral particles, along with maybe as many as 20,000 different bacterial cells." Yana and I look at each other in surprise. "And that's what we call clean air." Most of these microscopic components, 99.9999, stop me when you've heard enough nines, 999. Pretzel isn't kidding about the nines, so I raise my hand slightly and he grabs a breath. "Aren't harmful to us at all. Most of them are helpful. keeping us alive and healthy, and they're everywhere, on every surface, in our lungs, our guts, on our skin. There's no surface on Earth that doesn't harbor microbes. Even Mount Everest? Even Mount Everest. We've found bacteria and diatoms at heights of around 50 kilometers. That's easily 5 times the height of Everest. How do they get there? Storms. Bloody big storms. The sky is basically a microbial highway. What about Antarctica? I asked. Even in Antarctica, often hidden in lakes beneath miles of ice, cut off from the outside world for tens of millions of years, but still thriving in the darkness. He points at a patch of mud in front of his boots, saying, "Dig a hole in the ground. Dig down a couple of miles, looking for gold or diamonds. Dig so far the rock becomes absurdly hot to touch, and you'll still find microbes in the water, seeping through the cracks. 8 miles beneath the ocean, in the eternally dark depths of the Mariana Trench, we've found microbes in astonishing abundance. The pressure there is 8 tons per square inch. That's like Superman balancing a bus in the palm of his hand, and yet still, cellular life thrives." Jan asks the question I'm thinking, "But not the aliens? They don't have microbes?" "None of ours. Not yet, anyway," Angela says. "But as soon as they open the door and step out into our world, they will. Whatever microbes inhabit our 2 biospheres will suddenly come in contact. In some ways, that's the real first contact. It's inevitable, and that's the problem. We don't know what microbes make up their world, and we don't know how they'll interact with our microbes. I'd feel much more comfortable if these guys were landing in the Sahara. There are still microbes there, but it's an easier environment for us to isolate and control." Pretzel points at a monkey swinging through the trees. Branches bend beneath its weight, on the verge of snapping when the blur of fur switches hands, grabbing for some other branch as its legs swing wildly beneath it. Like a trapeze artist at the circus, it defies gravity, soaring through the jungle canopy with ease. "Here in the Congo, we've got an astonishing variety of species and an incredibly complex ecosystem. There's so much energy, so much life." Angela adds, "It's my job to monitor it. I'm here to detect any impact. We suspect our microbial life forms will be incompatible with theirs, but we really don't know for sure. Our environment could be lethal to them, just as theirs could be lethal to ours. Both biomes might ignore each other entirely, or they could compete against each other, with one aggressively winning over the other. It could be that there are battles played out at one level but not another. The complexity of what could happen is off the charts. The only way we're going to know what's happening is if we monitor the interaction closely." Petty Officer Garcia comes jogging over, grinning like a kid at Christmas, clearly pleased with himself. He joins our group quietly, stepping softly and making as though he never slipped away, but he looks pleased with himself for having a poo of all things. Pretzel gestures to the rest of the scientists setting up their equipment, saying, "If it was up to me, we'd undertake contact in space. Things would be much simpler in a nice, sterile, isolated environment." "And the caves?" I ask. Angela holds up a small plastic box with a spike protruding from one end. Chrome screws and rubber seals protect the contents from the humidity of the jungle. There's a digital display, but it's in black and white, with an array of dozens of seemingly meaningless numbers on it. Resting on a boulder beside her is a box with easily 100 other monitors, neatly stacked within. I need to distribute these out to a distance of 5 kilometers. They'll monitor soil and airborne microbes within about 2 feet, once shoved into the dirt. Getting these out there now will give us a good baseline during first contact, allowing us to measure any change. Pretzel realizes Angela hasn't actually answered my question. Oh, the caves will give us access to groundwater and subsurface microbes. Microbes are our canary in the coal mine, Angela says. Pretzel claps his hands together. So, what do you say? Are you up for a little adventure? Garcia waves Lieutenant Jackson over. There's a few things we need to talk about first. Pretzel doesn't look impressed, but I'm glad Garcia called the lieutenant over, as with my dad in Ubandi, I'm pretty sure I shouldn't go wandering around the jungle. Garcia explains the situation to Jackson, outlining the plan. Lieutenant Jackson confronts Pretzel. You really shouldn't be going out there. Can't someone else do this? You're just planting monitors, right? I could send out a few soldiers with instructions. No, Pretzel replies, shaking his head. We need to get an accurate baseline. Placement is important. But why you? We need you here in case questions arise regarding first contact protocols. What if CENTCOM calls for you? We'll have a radio on us out there, which is no different to being here and talking to them over any other radio. Lieutenant Jackson rubs the stubble on his chin, thinking deeply. Even though he doesn't agree with Pretzel, it's obvious the lieutenant is trying to be accommodating. He could be hard-nosed about this. My father would be, but not Jackson, which tells me something about his motives. Pretzel might still harbor some animosity over whatever happened in the Himalayas, but the lieutenant has put that behind him. He's trying hard to be fair and balanced. For all Pretzel's brilliance, that seems lost on him. I wish Pretzel could see that, rather than thinking the lieutenant is being difficult. I don't know about this, Jackson says, and I can see he's trying to balance being in operational command with deference to Pretzel as head of the scientific team. These guys don't need me looking over their shoulders, Pretzel replies, pointing at the scientists working on their equipment. Besides, out there, I'll have a bit of time to think laterally. I really don't like this. From the way the lieutenant shakes his head, I get the feeling he'd feel much more comfortable issuing orders that must be followed. Rational discussions aren't his forte, and Pretzel seems to have another agenda. I'm not sure why he wants to get out of camp, but he's intent on going into the jungle. It's probably the novelty factor. We'll be fine. We've got local guides. We're following established trails. And you want to take the boy out there? Jackson asks. I'm incensed. I'm not a boy. I'm a teenager, a young man. The look on my face must be telling, as it doesn't go unnoticed by either of them. Pretzel says, not him, them. The two of them. They've both lived here for years. They know the lay of the land, so we won't get lost. I appreciate the way Pretzel's included Yana, but I don't think it makes much difference to Lieutenant Jackson. Aren't there any other villagers that could take you out there? It's close, Pretzel counters, ignoring his question. A couple of miles, no more. An easy stroll on tracks these guys use all the time. And this is genuinely important, right? This isn't some... It's not the Himalayas. I'm not sure what happened between Pretzel and Jackson in Nepal, but I'd love to find out. Pretzel reasons with the lieutenant, gesturing with his hands toward the jungle. They know of a cave that will allow us to measure the microbial impact on the water table. That's a priority 1 target for us, as it will allow us to monitor any contamination seeping out of the contact zone and into subsurface aquifers. To his credit, the lieutenant is professional, weighing the merits against the risk. He says, "Command estimates touchdown at 400 hours tomorrow morning. I've got a truck coming in from Kisangani, turning around at 1600 this afternoon. That gives us a buffer of 12 hours prior to contact." He points at us. "I want those two on that truck this afternoon. Is that understood?" "Understood." Pretzel has a smile on his face a mile wide. "And if you're not back by 1500, I'll take a team of SEALs out there and hunt you down myself." Pretzel laughs. "Agreed. Garcia, you're with them. Stay in radio contact. I want reports on the hour. Any issues, you contact AWACS and report your location and operational status immediately. Understood?" "Affirmative." Lady. Pretzel and Angela load equipment into a bunch of backpacks, while Garcia unfolds a map, laying it out on a rock and positioning it using a compass. "Can either of you point out the caves on this map?" Yana and I both squint, looking at the squiggly lines marking the topography and various nearby rivers, trying to imagine we're hundreds of feet in the air, peering down on the jungle. Yana taps the map, lost in thought. I run my finger along a stream. "Is this Angawe? Over by Raka's hut?" She shakes her head, pointing to one side. "Nah, I think that's over there. The map looks wrong." "It could well be," Garcia says. "It's the best we could find, but it's at least 20 years old." "Don't worry," Yana says. "We won't get lost." I add, "Promise." "Oh, I know we won't." Garcia grins. He knows something. He's thinking about what he should and shouldn't tell us, which I find peculiar. His lips shift to one side as he ponders what to say next. I tilt my head slightly, on the verge of asking him what's so amusing. His eyes light up at my curiosity. "Hold your hand up, high as you can, with 3 fingers spread wide." Yana looks at me with a furrowed brow. I'll play along. I have no problem looking a little stupid. Garcia grabs a radio the size of a shoebox and unfolds a floppy antenna, holding the headset up to the side of his face. "Overlord, this is Sierra Charlie 6. Comms check. Confirm visibility. Over." He cranks up the volume, holding the radio so we can hear the reply. "Sierra Charlie, Overlord. Isolating imagery. Tracking your location. Confirm. We have acquisition. We make 3. Over." Yana and I look at each other in surprise. I switch to 4 fingers. The reply comes with a chuckle. "Correction. Someone's playing games down there. We've got 4. Repeat, 4. Over." "Copy that, Overlord. Sierra Charlie 6, out." "Y'all have a good day down there. Overlord, out." I drop my hand, turning, looking out at the clear blue sky. Like me, Yana is scanning the heavens, no longer looking for aliens. Out beyond the treetops, distant wisps of cloud drift lazily through the sky, but no planes. "You won't see them," Garcia says, "but they're out there. The eyes of the world are on this tiny village. Nothing is happening down here without everyone knowing about it. So don't scratch your ass." Huh. Yana's still looking for Overlord. Garcia picks up his pack, stuffing the radio inside. Overlord is one of 3 U.S. AWACS aircraft, circling anywhere from 100 to 200 miles out. They're coordinating a combat air patrol of F-22 Raptors and a bunch of Predator drones just in case. I smile, wondering if Overlord can see me grinning, and yet, in the rush of the moment, in the back of my mind, Angela's warning leaves me feeling somewhat unsettled. Forget about Hollywood. I think she's right. If a bunch of aliens can sail a bazillion miles through space, lasso an asteroid and build an elevator longer than Earth itself, they're not going to be stopped by a couple of fighter craft. I keep that thought to myself, wondering if the Navy SEALs are overconfident. I help Pretzel as he adjusts the backpack slung over his shoulders, wondering about the eyes on our small village, human and otherwise. Okay, everyone set? Already sweats running down the side of his cheeks. Pretzel hands Jana a tablet computer. Would you like to be our scribe? Sure. Simply mark down the number of each unit as we place them, and the computer will automatically geotag them. Okay. The rubber casing around the tablet is ridiculously thick. If it was dropped from a plane, I suspect it would bounce without breaking. Let's roll. Garcia grabs his rifle. Angela brings up the rear. As we make our way through the village, Pretzel hunches forward, keeping the weight of his pack over his legs. We could carry something, I say, gesturing to Jana and myself. What? And put me out of a job? Pretzel laughs, but he and Angela are both in their 60s at least. Pretzel hides his age well, more so than Angela, so I suspect he's older again, probably in his 70s. Flecks of gray hair and deep wrinkles betray the march of time. Keep your eyes on the counter, marking our distance from base camp. We need to put down monitors every 200 meters or so. Jana touches the screen, and among the various details there's a GPS map revealing our distance from the datum point sprayed on the boulder in the center of the village. Raka's hut is 48 meters from there. At 60 meters, we're crossing the wooden bridge, following a muddy road with deep ruts. Flies buzz around us. I'm liking this mud, Pretzel says, sliding slightly as he steps over exposed tree roots. Me too, Angela replies. Microbial paradise. Absolutely. Angela swings her pack down, leans it against a tree, and pulls out a couple of sensors, flicking them on. She hands me one, pushing the other against the base of a tree, facing out across the road. Can you put that one in the river, just below the surface, facing into the stream? Sure. Who knew science could be so much fun? You'll need to extend the antenna so it's above the water line. Okay, I'm loving this. I jog down the bank, half sliding in the long grass. Muddy water swirls around my legs. Startled fish dart into the shadows, flicking their tails and stirring the silt. I reach into the murky depths, watching as the glowing red LED disappears. The antenna unfolds to become quite rigid. It's extendable, reaching up almost 2 feet in height. I push the spike on the base of the probe into the mud and rocks, leaving about half of the metal antenna rising above the surface. Looking good. Angela is leaning on the bridge next to Jana, showing her how to enter information into the tablet. Coming through loud and clear. She turns to Pretzel, who's shed his backpack, leaning it against the railing. Pretzel says, "They'll work well this close to base camp, but we're going to need repeaters once we get deeper into the jungle." I've only got 4 booster stations, Angela says, focusing intently on the data streaming in from the first few probes. That'll have to do. I climb back up the bank. Angela goes to pick up her pack, but Jana beats her to it. I like her style, so I grab Pretzel's, hoisting it over my shoulder. Both scientists are polite, thanking us. Garcia winks at me. This is the best day ever. Jana takes the lead, with Garcia and Angela following, while Pretzel and I bring up the rear. It's roughly 10 a.m., and the sun is beating down on the jungle. Thin strands of light pierce the occasional gap in the canopy, forming sunbeams in the humid air, lighting up ferns and tree trunks. Sweat drips from me like rain, soaking my clothes. But I don't mind. Dead leaves and broken twigs crunch beneath my boots. Vines creep around massive tree trunks, slowly strangling these giants of the jungle. Occasionally, sunlight floods through a hole in the canopy where one of these Goliaths has fallen, flattening the undergrowth. Monkeys call out from the shadows, excited by our approach, warning each other even though we pose no threat. Insects swarm over the moldy leaves and rotten bark scattered across the ground. The smell of decay hangs in the air, but not from any carcass. Dead animals are stripped to the bone within a matter of days by the ants, so as pungent as the smell is, it's never putrid, more like that of compost. Pretzel pushes a probe deep into the rich, dark soil. Immediately, ants scurry over the box, claiming their prize, checking it for food. Garcia has a machete. He swings with a steady rhythm, hacking at branches hanging over the path, which is a bit of novelty for Yana and I, as we wouldn't bother. We're accustomed to darting and weaving through the foliage, being able to spot the dark outline of a leech hanging from the underside of a leaf and avoid the slimy parasite. There's something about their distinct shape that allows us to pick them out of the chaos, but Garcia's got energy to burn, at least for now. Like most paths through the jungle, we're following an animal trail. Humans by day, warthogs, chimps, and leopards by night, hence the branches hanging over the narrow track. It's only humans that are bothered by leaves. What do you make of all this, Josh? I'm taken back a little by Pretzel's question. I don't think he means the probes we're laying down every couple of 100 meters. He's talking about the aliens. Me? I'm not sure why he's interested in my opinion. I'm no one. Yes, you. I'm curious. Why ask me? Funny, but from my perspective, that's the more pertinent question. Garcia, Angela, and Pretzel quite literally dropped from the sky. They're scientists, soldiers, engineers. They've been working toward this day for decades. As for me, the lieutenant was right back in the village. I'm a kid, son of a wayward preacher. At best, I'm just part of the crowd. Oh, you're important. Never doubt that. Seems Pretzel is pretty good at reading minds. I don't follow, I say, slipping slightly in the mud. The animal trail narrows to barely a few inches as it rounds the side of a hill, slowly descending toward the caves. I grab a sapling, keeping my balance. People get importance all wrong. Celebrities, movie stars, singers, princes, and prime ministers. They're important, right? Wrong. They're entertainers, politicians, that's all. They're individuals, just like you and me. Nothing more, nothing less. Ah, but scientists, professors, doctors, surely they're important. Nope, they're individuals too. You see, none of this has any value if we aren't all equally important. Pretzel slips on the same muddy rocks I did, grabbing at the same loose sapling. I bend under a vine, feeling leaves brush against my shoulder as he continues. Point is, what we're doing out here in the jungle is meaningless if it's not for everyone, from the President of the United States all the way down to some beggar on the streets of Mumbai. And you're as important as any of them. So what do you think about our alien visitors? I'm not sure what to say. I'm just a teen. As we're talking, we've fallen behind the others, lagging back easily 40 feet. But they haven't noticed, and Pretzel doesn't mind. I get the impression we could be wading through 3 feet of pristine snow, or walking along a sandy beach in Hawaii, and Pretzel would still be asking me the same question. Me? I think it's pretty cool. We're not alone. There's life elsewhere out there in the universe. That's kinda exciting. Pretzel nods. Sweat drips from his forehead, but he's oblivious. His dark eyes are kind, while his frail, aging hands seem to me like those of an artist. His fingers have the precision and elegance of a musician. Even the slightest motion portrays harmony, as though he were conducting an orchestra or crafting a marble sculpture with the utmost care. Pretzel moves a vine to one side with the grace of a surgeon caring for a patient. "We're intrinsically social," he says. "All animals are. Hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary selective pressure has taught us to cooperate, so we seek out a connection with others." My mind is suddenly electrified by the concept. You think that's why they're here? Because they're social? Because they want to connect with us? He smiles, and from behind pearly white teeth says, "It's a possibility." My dad wouldn't be comfortable with all the talk about evolution and social ties. For him, if an idea can't be expressed in terms of thee and ye, thou and shout, it's not worth considering. I can't bring myself to tell Pretzel that my dad thinks the world is barely 6,000 years old. Even among Catholics, his views are outmoded, but my dad has always held to a literal interpretation of the Bible. I love my dad, but the pressure to believe him at every step makes me feel uncomfortable. Pretzel seems to sense reluctance on my part, but he's not sure why. "There's nothing to be afraid of." I nod. He thinks I'm worried about the aliens. Oh, they're the last of my concerns. If anything, they've brought some welcome relief. The track widens as we descend a gentle slope covered in thin trees. Yana waves at me through the undergrowth. She, Angela, and Garcia have stopped, dropping their packs beside a clearing. Long grass reaches up to waist height. They crouch, hiding by the edge of the trail. "What's going on?" Pretzel asks. "Oh, I think they found Lady." "Lady?" "Come on," I say, creeping forward, careful not to step on any twigs, slowly lowering my profile as we approach the break in the jungle canopy. Sunlight streams in through the opening. I slip my backpack to the ground and point. Pretzel follows my gaze. Tall weeds sway, but not with the wind. Dark shapes frolic in the green grass. Bits of fur are visible through the undergrowth. Pretzel whispers the obvious. "Gorillas." To be fair, after 4 years, they still fascinate me. First-timers always get a bit giddy. There's something magical about seeing apes in the wild. There are tens of thousands of different species of birds and lizards and butterflies, but when it comes to humans, there's just us, or so we think, until we meet chimps and gorillas. Suddenly the distance between us and all the other animals on Earth becomes that much smaller. I'd never say as much to my dad, but I don't think they're just another animal. They're special. It's their eyes. Intelligence gleams from behind their dark pupils. I think they're much closer to us than I'd ever admit to him. Angela turns, mouthing something to Pretzel. She shakes her head in disbelief. The grin lighting up her face suggests she's mesmerized by the sight. I whisper, "Can you see Lady? Is she here?" Yana cranes her neck, peering through the grass. "I'm not sure." Carefully, Pretzel opens the backpack and pulls out a sensor. He pushes it into the soft soil, extending the aerial. As quietly as he can, he presses the power button. A red LED glows, and the box imparts a distinct beep. They've all done that, but it's only now I notice as the sound is so foreign, so alien within the jungle. Even though the noises around us are a cacophony of confusion, with birds squawking in the trees, insects calling, and the wind rustling through the leaves, that one solitary beep is distinctly out of place. It screams unnatural. Pretzel cringes. A dark head appears above the grass. Beady eyes stare into the trees, looking for us. knowing we're here, hidden in the shadows. Oh, not good, Yana whispers, crouched in front of me, batting at the air with her hands, wanting us to retreat. Ooh! We freeze. A gorilla rises up. Broad, dark shoulders blot out the greenery. Garcia begins slowly bringing his rifle down from his shoulder. I whisper, no, he'll think you're a hunter. And that's bad because, well, Yana provides a succinct version of what I'm trying to express. He'll rip your arms out of their sockets. With that, Garcia shoulders his rifle, remaining crouched beside us. Yana continues, whatever happens, don't run. Each cry echoing across the clearing is brutal, guttural, venting, clearing the air from the lungs in anticipation of a fight to the death. Woo, woo, woo. Yana whispers, no eye contact. We stay perfectly still. I dare not raise my eyes, catching only the motion of the grass on the edge of my vision. For a moment, it seems as though the grunting is subsiding. There's been no other threat beyond that one solitary electronic beep, and it was faint, just something off in the distance from their perspective. Yana and I visit the troop at least once a month. They know our smell. They know we mean no harm. I'm at the point where I think the danger has passed, when the large male silverback begins pounding the ground. His arms fly up, loose and high over his head, before his clenched fists thunder back into the dirt. Grass and rocks are thrown into the air as he continues working himself into a frenzy. Not good. Yee-haw! Yee-haw! He rushes forward on all fours, trampling the grass, covering the distance between us in a blur of anger. Broad, muscular shoulders flex. Chest muscles ripple beneath coarse, straggly fur. The gorilla moves with a lope, a distinct gait that comes in waves. He surges toward us before pulling back a few feet, still unsure but threatening to attack. Clenched fists beat at his chest as he rises, baring his teeth and growling. There's nothing as terrifying as the gaping jaw of a fully grown silverback, roaring into the jungle with coarse dark hair, jet black skin, deep red gums, and vicious white fangs. His mouth seems to overextend, reaching far beyond what a human could manage. A single bite could crush a skull. Ooh, ah! The deep, echoing bellow passes right through me, causing the hair on my arms to stand on end. I don't think even Yana's seen the troop leader this upset before. It's probably the helicopters. The troop would have been scared by the sudden, loud intrusion into the jungle, and he feels he has to defend them from danger. I don't know that I've ever felt as small and helpless and insignificant as I do right now. My heart is racing. It's all I can do not to turn and run. Yana has a firm grip on my wrist. She's trembling. Whoo, whoo, whoo. It's not a question. It's a threat, a challenge, an invitation. He wants to fight, to prove his prowess and his position as boss. The silverback smacks his chest again, pounding his black pectoral muscles like a drum. Deep, guttural growls, clenched fists, sharp teeth. There are blurred haze barely visible through the long grass. The gorilla is so close I can smell his fetid breath drifting on the wind. The stench of piss and feces is rancid, intimidating, overpowering. He paces back and forth through the weeds, coming within a few feet of us but not advancing. It's as though he's marking a line in the grass, declaring his ground, daring us to approach, calling for cowards to show themselves. We shrink back, edging away from the track. Angela has her hand over her mouth, crouching beside Pretzel. Garcia has positioned himself closest to the clearing, although I'm not sure he'd be much more than a speed bump to a rampaging silverback. Yee-haw-oo! Yee-haw-oo! The gorilla bellows, tilting his head back and opening his throat, challenging all comers, letting the entire jungle know he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of this world. His dense fur can't hide his well-defined shoulder muscles and massive biceps. At a guess, he could bench press a small car, if not throw it aside, tossing it like some fabled superhero. Suddenly, from our right, tree branches and saplings come crashing down. They're screaming, yelling. Another gorilla comes bounding into the clearing, slapping at the grass and swinging her head from side to side. She gallops in front of the male, swinging her arms high and wide, waving them as though she were trying to make herself appear large. She has a broken branch in one hand, dragging it along behind her as she drops to walk on all fours. With a thick, leathery brow, dark eyes, and flared nostrils, she grunts repeatedly, only her vocalization isn't threatening and isn't directed at us. She dances around the male. Her mouth opens wide, but unlike the silverback, she's not baring her teeth. Hoo, hoo, hoo. She slaps the ground with the branch. Torn bark and green leaves sway around in her club-like hand, as though she were waving a flag. Pretzel whispers, "Lady?" I nod. To my surprise, Lady twirls. She continues swinging her arms around her head. She's distracting the male. All his bluster and bravado seem somewhat redundant as she makes light of our presence, ignoring us even though we're less than 10 feet away. Lady passes between us and the male again, but she avoids remaining between us, prancing to one side of the perplexed male. She drops the branch and pulls bunches of grass out of the ground, throwing the thin strands at him. The grass, of course, simply flitters through the air, catching in the breeze and diffusing like confetti. The male lets out a huff and drops back to all fours. His head sways almost as though he's responding to something she said. Reluctantly, he turns and walks away on all fours through the long grass. His ass sways as he saunters back to the troop. Shit drops to the muddy ground, falling in a stream of sodden clumps as a final insult to us. There's a definite rhythm, a deliberate plop, 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 as he empties his bowels in our direction. Lady continues what seems more like a dance than a display of anger, letting out cries that are almost in mimicry of the big male. They're softer, delivered without anger. Hoo, 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 yeehaw, hoo. Yana whispers, "Lady." Lady scuttles sideways, coming over toward us while still keeping an eye on the male. For his part, the big old silverback has worn himself out. His care factor is gone, and he plops on a bed of crushed grass, stretching out in the sun, as if it wasn't hot enough already. Lady grunts, briefly crossing her fists over her chest and then grabbing at her thumb. "Oh yeah, he does," Yana says. Pretzel picks up on what's happening before I can say anything. His eyes go wide and his face lights up. What was that? Yana has a massive grin on her face. She said, "He likes a good shit." Garcia bursts out laughing, and Lady reciprocates, hooting and slapping at the ground, only she alternates hands, hitting the grass on either side of her. The others stare at Garcia, surprised by his outburst. He blushes, pointing at Lady, trying to deflect attention back to her, but I know precisely why he laughed, and can't help chuckle myself. Seems he can relate to taking a good shit. Lady squats, facing us, rocking rather than nodding with her head. "She can talk?" Pretzel asks. "You understand her?" Angela asks, even more surprised. Yana answers them both with a single word. "Yes." "Okay, you're going to have to rewind this one for us," Angela says. "Sign language." "You taught her sign language?" Pretzel asks. "Not me, silly." I love Yana. To her, all this seems as blatantly obvious as me describing a McDonald's drive-thru to her dad. Gorillas sign all the time. They speak to each other with their hands and fingers, sometimes even their feet. As she's talking, Lady signs and Yana replies, holding two conversations at once. I've seen Yana sign with Lady before, but never with quite as much vigor. My mother is deaf. She taught Lady our language long before I was born, but Lady has her own language. Pretzel looks at Angela with raised eyebrows. Bilingual? Angela shrugs. We have apes that use sign language back in America, but I've never heard of it in the wild. We had scientists here, Yana replies, from the jungles of York. York's not Pretzel begins, although he never finishes his sentence, allowing Yana to continue. They studied them with cameras. Ape language is simple, but it's there. Lady, though, she's special. She certainly is, Angela concedes. Yana and Lady sign. She's saying, don't worry about Tiny. Tiny? Pretzel asks. He didn't look that small to me. She means his dick, I say, seeing Yana feels a little embarrassed by the concept. She named him that? Angela asks. Yana nods. She knows that's an insult, right? Oh yeah, Yana says, laughing. Lady points at the scientists. Although when a gorilla points, it's unlike anything a human would intuitively recognize. Rather than sticking a finger out, she directs her knuckles at them, letting her black, wrinkled fingers hang limp before us. It's as though she's the Queen of England, offering us her hand to kiss. I guess she's the Queen of the Jungle. Yana interprets the gesture. She wants to know your names. The aging Indian scientist says, Ah, well, it's not Tiny. Angela bursts out laughing, surprising Lady, who reciprocates with a few guttural hoots, even though she can't possibly understand what was said. It seems laughter is contagious across species. Yana looks a little confused. Pretzel faces Lady, pointing at himself. I'm Pretzel. Pretzel doesn't mean anything to her. Or me. Oh, okay. How about this? Pretzel turns around on the track, still crouching, shuffling with his boots. I guess he's trying to mimic twisting like a pretzel or something, but as he turns, he taps his chest, saying his name a couple of times. Lady gets excited. She tears at a clump of grass. Roots dangle from the clod of dirt swinging below the fine grass stalks. Lady pulls the grass through her hand, stripping fine seeds from the kernels. We watch, mesmerized, as she mimics Pretzel, turning around and round, sprinkling grass seeds on her head. She comes to a halt and grunts as she pulls at another clump of grass. She wants you to do it, Yana says. Lady holds out a handful of grass seeds. Pretzel has no hesitation. He kneels just a few feet away and reaches out an open hand. Thick, dark, leathery fingers tap his palm, dumping a small pile of fine seeds in his hand. He copies Lady, holding one hand high above his head, allowing grass seeds to fall in his hair as he twirls on the muddy track, squatting as he spins, almost falling sideways into a tree as he gets a little dizzy. Lady jumps up and down in the grass. She's on all fours, snorting with delight. Angela backs up, as does Garcia, unsure about the intentions of this wild gorilla, but Pretzel doesn't seem to notice. He's found his inner gorilla and is joining in, jumping around like her, albeit crouched on two legs and using his hands to stop from falling over. Yana laughs her ass off. What's so funny, I ask. Both Yana and Lady point at Pretzel, who's come to a stop slightly out of breath. He's perplexed. Grass seeds have caught in his thin, wispy hair. She says she fooled you. She made you look silly, made you look pretty like her. She played a joke on me. Yana can barely talk, she's laughing so hard. Yes. Pretzel plays up to the fully grown female gorilla weighing easily 3 times his weight. He points his finger, pretending to scold her, but he too is laughing. Lady tears another handful of grass and tosses it in the air. Pretzel plays the fool, ducking his head beneath the strands, trying to catch them in his hair, which Lady loves. She slaps her legs, grunting in delight. Lady turns to Angela, pursing her lips and signing to Yana. Oh no, Angela says, waving her hands, not feeling comfortable with the attention of a great ape. She wants to know your name, Yana says, but you've got to describe it in terms she can understand. Angela, Angel, she points at the sky. Lady signs something, seeking clarification from Yana. She thinks you mean leaves or trees. Lady picks up the branch she dragged into the clearing, pointing at it as Yana explains. She's confused as to why someone would be named after a branch. Angela laughs, pointing behind Lady at the clear blue sky. That communicates. Lady shakes her head, touching her hand briefly against the side of her head and then her lips. Loud bird. She thinks you mean helicopter. That'll do, Angela nods, accepting that as close enough. She's left-handed, Pretzel says, noting her preference for signing. Huh? I say. I've never noticed that. How many words does she know? Yana replies, I don't know. I've never asked her. I'm not sure she would know. I don't even know how to ask. And your mom taught her to sign? I think they taught each other. Back when Mom was my age, the troop lived over by the village, on this side of the river. They stayed close for protection, from leopards, I think. As the village grew, they moved away. Angela points. The scars on her arms. Yes, leopards will attack anyone that's isolated. Humans, gorillas, chimps. The only safety is in numbers. I speak up. About a year ago, we found 2 of them dead. 2 of them? Pretzel asks. After a fight, a gorilla and a leopard. Lots of blood. Yana's eyes go wide. Blood everywhere. On the trees, the bushes, soaking into the mud. The gorilla ripped the leopard's jaw off, tore out its throat, but he'd been so badly hurt by the big cat, he never made it more than 20 yards. As we talk, Lady's eyes follow the conversation. She may not know what we're talking about, but she understands we're saying something about her and her kind. She nudges Yana, wanting in on the discussion. Yana, though, is unprepared for what amounts to a shove and has to reach out with her hand to avoid toppling over. Yana's not bothered by it, though, just surprised. She signs something, although I'm not sure what. Lady plucks some nuts from the broken branch, offering them to us. Her thick, dark, curled fingers reach for us, offering food. Yana says, she's always trying to fatten us up. She thinks we're apes, skinny, hairless apes. She's right, Pretzel says. We are. How often do you talk? Angela asks. Once a week. My mother still comes out here, but not so often. She says the gorillas bring good luck. We bring Lady vegetables, stuff like yams. Pretzel nods. I bet she likes them. She does. Although the conversation is about Lady, it's not centering on her, and she tires of our company. As we're no longer interacting with her, she gets distracted by a butterfly fluttering past. She leans back, rolling in the grass, losing interest in us entirely. "Hey, lady," Yana calls out, pulling a small apple from her pocket. Here in the jungle, apples are small and sour. They're nothing like back in America, but Lady doesn't know any different. Yana tosses the apple, and it rolls in the grass, almost disappearing in the weeds. Lady scoops it up rather than grabbing it as a human would, and bites through it. There's no concern for pips in the core or the stem. She raises her head in acknowledgement, a tacit thank you, and turns to join her troop. As she saunters off through the long grass, her body sways, but there's no poop. Lady's far too polite for that. Pretzel sits on his haunches, watching her with intense interest. Just magnificent. Who would have thought it, Angela says. We're about to make first contact with an intelligent extraterrestrial species, but I'm more fascinated by contact with a troop of gorillas. I wonder what they'll make of all this, Pretzel says, pointing at the sky as he gets to his feet. I pick up the backpack, and we continue down the track. I too wonder. In the movies, it's all about humans and aliens. There's never any concern given to the millions of other species on this planet, and I wonder what the aliens will think about gorillas, like Tiny and Lady. Mordecai. Within 20 yards, we hear the sound of a waterfall cascading over the cliff. Pretzel sets another monitor in the shallows of a nearby stream. This is a different river, right? Yes, Yana says. The Utanga comes down from the tableland. Awesome. Rivers are wonderful aggregators, concentrating particulate matter and pollutants. Everything flows downhill. Makes for good sample points. Angela, can you set up a repeater station? We're below the brow of the hill, so we're going to need to start bouncing signals off the ionosphere to get them back to base camp. On it. Angela straps a nondescript gray box to one of the trees, extending an aerial and checking the connection from her tablet computer. As we approach the edge of the cliff, the trees thin as the ground drops away. Occasionally we get a glimpse of the valley opening out below us through the broken canopy. We stay on the track, winding our way down the slope. Although the height of the waterfall is roughly 50 to 60 feet, we're following a trail that zigzags back and forth, created by animals, tracing the lay of the land, taking the most efficient but not the most direct route to the base. Most of the cliff is hidden by ferns and bushes growing out of the rocks. In the jungle, space is at a premium, and trees twist and wind their roots over the rocks, clinging on to the cliff face as they reach for the sun. The wind blows moist air from the waterfall along the track, cooling this small portion of the jungle. Garcia hacks at vines blocking the path. Boulders form a series of pools at the base of the waterfall. The caves are visible further along the cliff face, appearing as dark shadows behind the undergrowth, deep cracks in the rocks. Pretzel points through the trees. There's someone swimming down there. Given the lily-white complexion, it's clear he's European and skinny dipping. Who's that? I don't know, I reply, unable to make him out at this distance. There are not many people it could be, as the jungle isn't exactly crowded. Brother Mordecai, maybe? You know him? Garcia asks. Yes, I think it's him. We lose sight of Brother Mordecai as we descend, slowly trudging toward the base of the waterfall. Rocks and boulders hide our approach. There's no path down here, and we're forced to clamber over the debris that's fallen from the cliff face as it has eroded over the years. Watch for snakes, Yana says, which immediately gets Angela's attention. Snakes? Pretzel raises an eyebrow. Garcia doesn't seem bothered. Angela goes on to ask, You get a lot of snakes down here? I understand what she means, as I was surprised by this as well when Yana first brought me down here. Snakes at the base of a waterfall is something that's counterintuitive. It didn't make sense until she explained it to me. Hundreds of them, Yana replies, speaking as though it's entirely normal. Sometimes thousands during the monsoon season. Hundreds? Pretzel asks. Thousands? Angela says, latching on to the higher figure with a sense of alarm. Yana shrugs. They're mostly dead. Mostly. Wait a minute, Pretzel says, coming to a stop beside a boulder that reaches above head height. You're saying they get washed down here? Yana nods. But even when they're dead, they can be deadly. Watch where you put your hands. I say, smell that? In turn, each of them sniff at the air. Dead snakes. Pretzel nods. Garcia has found a snake lying between the rocks beneath our feet. He grabs it by the tail, raising it up. Although the snake is quite thin, it's long and he has to work his hands along its body before its head finally appears. Angela's eyes go wide. Black mamba, Yana says, even though the snake's skin is more of a deep gray with a whitish underbelly. I'm not sure whether that's because of some change that occurred after it died, or if that was its natural color. The head hangs limp. Yana points at the mouth, which is slightly open, almost as if the animal is lying in wait, ready to spring upon its prey. Still dangerous. If you catch your finger on those fangs. She doesn't have to elaborate further. Garcia drops the snake back on the rocks. Pretzel and Angela give it a wide berth, clambering over a shoulder-height boulder as we continue on. Yana says, they get caught in the rains, dragged over the waterfall and onto the rocks. Be careful where you put your hands. Don't reach for any handholds you can't see, as the snakes are often strung out on top of the rocks. Garcia slips on some leather gloves and climbs over the large boulder barring our way. Water winds its way around the rocks, flowing gently on. Reeds grow out of the gaps in the rubble. As we follow, Garcia occasionally points to one side, letting us know where a snake lies baking in the sun. Sure enough, as I step up behind Yana, there's a shriveled carcass withering in the heat, thin scales clinging to a gaunt row of bones. That is definitely a black mamba, Angela says, looking at the dark skin draped over the rock. We're all extra careful when grabbing at outcrops while climbing over the boulders. Often, the snakes look like fallen branches or bits of cloth wrapped over the scorching hot stones. I wonder if Overlord is watching us, or if the aliens slowly descending to Earth can see us. My eyes drift to the skies as my mind wanders, wondering if, when, the rope ladder will be visible to us from the ground. How big is it? How thick? Such a device is inconceivable to me, disappearing into the heavens. Dad taught me about Jacob's ladder in the book of Genesis, but I suspect even that pales in comparison. Hey, Garcia calls out as we come to a rocky beach shaded by the jungle canopy. Water thunders into the pool, cascading over the cliff above, kicking up a constant mist drifting across the boulders. Brother Mordecai is out in the deep and can't hear us over the torrent of water madly churning the pool. Pretzel waves his hands around as though he were trying to signal plain. Mordecai sees us and swims in, using freestyle with long, carefully honed strokes. Although there are plenty of leeches in most of the rivers and streams throughout Africa, they're not fond of waterfalls. Something about the noise and turbulent water seems to scare them off, which is nice. Yana and I love coming here, but normally in groups of 8 to 10 with other teens from the village. As he gets close, Brother Mordecai stands, walking into the shallows without any regard for being naked. To him, the body is a temple, not something to hide or be ashamed of, but rather a jewel to be celebrated. Angela looks up at the trees, around to one side at low-hanging branches, and then over at the far bank, anywhere but at his penis as it droops from his waist. Yana looks at me. I shrug. Brother Mordecai never was orthodox. For his part, Mordecai doesn't care. I can't believe he risked coming down here alone. If a leopard picked up his scent, it would have attacked him, but as they generally hunt at night, I guess it's low risk. Maybe. Before Brother Mordecai reaches the shore, Garcia says, "We're evacuating the area. I need you to head back to the village and jump on a truck to Kisangani." "Is that a fact?" Mordecai says, dripping wet as he opens his backpack and grabs a towel. Water laps at his bare feet. Much to the annoyance of Garcia, he rubs his hair dry along with his arms and chest, but doesn't so much as touch his groin, let alone dry his legs. It seems he realizes precisely how awkward he's making us feel, and is happy to accentuate that with his reply. "I think you'll find I don't answer to the U.S. military. Mine is a higher calling." Pretzel raises his thumb in agreement. "I like this guy." Garcia glances at Pretzel. He's less than amused by the aging Indian scientist, annoyed by how he's apparently switched sides. "What?" Pretzel replies, holding his arms out wide in his defense. "He's got a point. This isn't our call. Who are we to say who they want to make contact with?" Garcia's military. Orders are the overriding concern. He reaches into Mordecai's backpack as though it was his own and grabs a pair of shorts, throwing them at the preacher's crotch. Mordecai catches them with one hand and slips them on, but he's in no rush. Angela relaxes a little, but she looks as though she's enjoying the standoff, clearly understanding the dynamic at work between the two men. Like Pretzel, I get the feeling she sees authority as a means, not an end, and wants to see a fight of sorts. Not physically, of course, but like all of us, she's curious how this will play out. Brother Mordecai is anything but predictable. "Why should I answer to you?" Mordecai asks, which leaves Garcia enraged. The veins on his neck are pronounced. Rather than reacting, though, he slows down, picking his response, keeping it measured, using his military discipline to stay in control of himself first and foremost. "These orders are for your protection." Clever. He's removed himself from the discussion, attributing the decision to some nameless officer, someone not present, so Mordecai can't argue with them. And it's for your protection. Ah, the personal touch. I've seen my father use this tactic with the villagers, only I tend to miss it when it's directed at me, only realizing I've been played after the fact. Pretzel seems intrigued by Mordecai's point and wants to explore it further. "Don't get me wrong, Petty Officer Garcia. I know you've got a job to do. I understand you're here for our protection, but we need to recognize we're in uncharted waters. None of our assumptions hold, not anymore. Everything we've ever known is about to be overturned. All our preconceptions and ideas, none of them are worth squat. You and I might recognize one authority. He recognizes another. As for them, who knows?" Brother Mordecai puts on a shirt, draping the damp towel over his shoulders like a cloak. He sits on a boulder with his bare feet still in the water. The contrast to Garcia couldn't be more stark. Pebbles crunch beneath the thick soles of his combat boots as he walks around. His camouflage trousers are functional, with rubber knee pads and various pockets bulging with stuff. Even in the sweltering heat, he's wearing some kind of combat vest with dozens of pouches, presumably full of ammunition or other equipment. He's got his sleeves rolled up, exposing his thick, muscular forearms, which are a clear contrast to Mordecai's thin, white arms. Garcia keeps his rifle slung over his shoulder, but it's symbolic of his ability to project lethal force. Mordecai has nothing beyond the worn Bible sitting beside his backpack. Garcia points at Mordecai and then Pretzel, using his trademark deliberation, acting as though he were a police officer directing traffic at a busy intersection. An alien vessel is about to touch down less than 5 miles from here. With all due respect, this is an issue for the government, not the church. Pretzel takes exception to that comment and comes to the defense of Brother Mordecai. The government? Really? You think a bunch of bureaucrats and soldiers are our best emissaries? Pretzel slumps down on a rock opposite Mordecai, with Garcia standing to one side on the pebble beach, roughly midway between them. Angela, Yana, and I drop our backpacks and sit on a tree trunk in the narrow stretch of beach, curling around the side of the falls, enjoying the cool, wet breeze coming from the thundering water. I'm fascinated by the discussion. Science is our only option, Pretzel says, holding his hands out with his palms open, making as though such a conclusion was obvious. Brother Mordecai says, I beg to differ. For thousands of years, religion has been the cornerstone of humanity, the driving force behind progress. Pretzel looks down at the stones by his boots, shaking his head. Given how outspoken he is, it must take all his resolve not to respond. He's trying to be polite, diplomatic, something that doesn't suit him. He presses his fingers together, lost in thought. I can see the pressure building in the intensity of his gaze as it narrows on the preacher. His dark eyes are piercing. Just as he was with my father, Brother Mordecai is oblivious to the social clues around him. He continues, saying, Given the sheer number of believers across all time, let alone the billions of faithful alive today, I'd argue that, regardless of faith, religion provides the best representation of humanity. Pretzel is brutal, offering only one word in rebuttal. Best? The jungle is never silent, but in that instant, the water cascading over the falls, the screaming of monkeys in the trees, and the incessant screeching of birds overhead seems distant. Even Brother Mordecai is quiet for a moment, something my father failed to accomplish. He regathers and counters. For you, this is first contact, but not so for us. Whoa, wait a minute there. Pretzel has a finger raised, wanting some clarification. Petty Officer Garcia cuts him off with, What do you mean for us? I suspect Garcia's motivation is more pragmatic than Pretzel's scientific rationale. Garcia is thinking Mordecai may have knowledge of some earlier contact here in the jungle, but I know what Mordecai means. Our eyes meet. Tell them, Josh. The two men turn to me, looking at me as though I hold the key to some mystic secret. I'd rather Brother Mordecai didn't drop me into his wild theory like this. I'm not sure what I believe, but Garcia and Pretzel are waiting on my response. It's Ezekiel, I say, getting a feel for the shifting dynamic at play between us. When Garcia first marched in here, he was leading our small band, providing Pretzel and Angela with the opportunity to set up their biometric probes throughout the jungle. Yana and I were guides of sorts helping out. Brother Mordecai was the stranger, the outsider, the intruder. By directing the conversation to me, Brother Mordecai has flipped the tables on them, suggesting there's more going on than they realize, and showing the bond he has with me. For my part, I feel conflicted. Brother Mordecai is an old friend of my father. I've known him all my life. Petty Officer Garcia's a Navy SEAL that literally dropped out of the sky this morning. Pretzel and Angela are scientists. They couldn't be more removed from my daily life if they tried, and yet I feel more of an affinity for them than I do for Mordecai or even my own dad. I'm not sure why. Perhaps it's the sense of adventure. Perhaps it's the energy and excitement they've brought with them. Maybe it's the shifting perspective they've shown me, with the promise of opening new worlds. But now I find myself being dragged back to my roots, and I don't like it. Before I can say anything, Pretzel asks, "As in the biblical prophet?" I nod, but my eyes cast down. Brother Mordecai gestures with his hands, wanting me to go on, but this is his crazy idea. Mordecai doesn't disappoint, quoting the Bible from memory. "And their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning." Pretzel raises an eyebrow, making eye contact with both Angela and Garcia as Brother Mordecai continues. "It is the testimony of Scripture." Pretzel clenches his lips. Angela says, "No offense, Brother Mordecai, but we're scientists. We need evidence." "How is this not evidence?" Mordecai asks, holding up his Bible. "When Columbus discovered the Americas and then returned to Spain, what evidence did he have beyond his word?" Pretzel says, "Columbus brought back slaves, birds, plants." Mordecai isn't impressed. "Things he could have found in Africa. He promised gold and spices, but he found none. His word, though, was his proof, his bond." Angela interjects with an afterthought. "He brought back syphilis. That's something the Europeans didn't have." "Score one to the microbiologist." Pretzel smiles, turning back to Mordecai, trying not to laugh. "You mock me at your peril," Mordecai says. "But the Bible speaks of creatures not found on earth. The Scriptures describe things that can only now be understood." "I get it," Pretzel says. "You want to believe. You see something that seems to fit within your framework of knowledge, and it's easy to read that into the Bible. We all see what we want to see." Mordecai flips through the pages of his ragged Bible. "Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were round, and they sparkled like burnished bronze." He looks up at Pretzel and Angela. "What does that describe? Where have you seen that before? How is that not the pads of a landing craft like the Apollo?" Garcia steps back. He seems content to let this play out between Mordecai and the scientists. "There are a lot of things that could be describing," Angela says, trying to be kind. Mordecai continues with, "And the likeness of the firmament was upon the heads of the living creature, and was as the color of the terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above." I'm impressed by Pretzel. He's neither angry nor aggressive. He's not treating Brother Mordecai with disdain. He seems genuinely supportive, even if he doesn't agree. He asks, "And you think this is happening now?" Mordecai says, "I think it's what happened then, and it's happening again. The firmament is the sky. The color of crystal is blue, stretched out over their heads. How is that not your space elevator?" "Wow," Pretzel says, shaking his head and looking over at Angela. It seems as though he's unsure where to begin, and is looking for her to say something before he offends the preacher. "If there was some prior contact, we would expect more evidence," Angela says in a soft-spoken, considerate voice. "Converging lines of evidence are convincing. A single source, like Ezekiel, doesn't give us much to go on. If there were multiple references, perhaps from different observers in different cultures, or if there was some physical evidence supporting the notion, Data is plural, not singular. Pretzel asks, Ezekiel lived what, around 2,500 years ago? Mordecai nods. He lived in Israel, right? Mordecai says, yes, before being exiled to Babylon. Okay, that reinforces my point. He's nowhere near the equator. Israel is above the Tropic of Cancer, right? As from memory, that passes below the Mediterranean, running through Egypt. Babylon's even further north again, right? Yes, but why is that important? Mordecai asks. Angela gets it. So the extraterrestrials are lowering a cable to Earth from an asteroid, but that can only happen at the equator. Anywhere along the equator, but only on the equator. I don't understand, Mordecai says. Angela replies, orbits are counterintuitive. They have very exact requirements. Pretzel clarifies. Everything in space is in motion. The only way to stay stationary relative to a position on Earth is to remain directly above the equator. We have geostationary satellites, but they're only ever over the equator. If what you say is correct, and the book of Ezekiel contains an account of an extraterrestrial encounter like the one we're witnessing, then Ezekiel wasn't an eyewitness. Someone else was, and he simply recounted the story, as this particular type of encounter could only occur in a very narrow geographic band. Pretzel gets to his feet, slapping his thighs. Anyway, it's a nice, entertaining idea, but we have work to do. Where are those caves, Josh? And just like that, I'm back on Team Silent. Waterfall. We follow the base of the cliff, moving away from the waterfall, planting sensors in various locations, climbing trees and strapping probes to the underside of branches, as well as digging into the rotten leaves on the ground to bury them just below the surface. The ants find them fascinating, swarming over them within seconds, diligently looking for some way to break into these alien devices. For me, that's the strange thing about the scientists. They're here to study extraterrestrials, but to us, they're the ones from another world. Petty Officer Garcia is out in front. Yana and Angela are walking ahead of me, with Pretzel bringing up the rear. Without meaning to pry, I'm interested to listen to their conversation. Yeah, she's quite something, huh? Yana says in response to a comment by Angela. They're talking about Lady. I think she's brilliant. You know, when we were dropped into the jungle, we thought we knew what to expect. We thought all the surprises were going to come from above. We never expected to meet you and Josh, let alone Lady. Yana is a little embarrassed by the attention. Her eyes drift down, watching the fall of her shoes on the track. Typical African modesty. She never gives herself enough credit. Angela says, assumptions are always dangerous, Yana. Instinctively, we rely on them, but we shouldn't. We really shouldn't. Take Pretzel and me. We thought this was all about E.T., but it's not. It's about you and Josh and Lady and Tiny. This is your home, and they're just dropping by. Do you think they're dangerous? Yana asks, and I'll quicken my pace, not wanting to miss Angela's reply. We can't assume anything. Everything's dangerous. Helicopters, cars, bicycles. We live in an inherently dangerous world, so we take precautions, like wearing seatbelts or a helmet. Yana doesn't understand. You mean they're dangerous? Kinda like snakes or leopards? Not just them. Absolutely everything is dangerous in some way. Water's dangerous. People drown, right? But it's more than that. Drink too much water and you die. Too much oxygen is poisonous. So even good things must be balanced or they become dangerous. It's pretty wild when you think about life like that, huh? Yeah, crazy, Yana says. There's warmth in her voice. She likes Dr. O'Brien. Although we call her Angela because she told us to, I'm sure Yana is like me, thinking of her more formally as Dr. O'Brien when she talks about science. She carries herself with an air of confidence we both find refreshing. She knows I'm listening, trailing in just a few feet behind them. I don't think the aliens mean us harm. Their whole approach has been cautious, but there are dangers. That's not a problem, though. We just need to manage those risks. That's why we have these probes, Yana says. Yes, exactly. We have these probes so we can understand any potential danger. It's not something to be afraid of, but we need to be cautious. Yana nods her head in agreement. I like Dr. Angela O'Brien. She's smart. As we pass through the dense undergrowth, we come across a termite nest. Oh, this looks interesting, she says, and we come to a stop. Garcia watches from afar, standing almost 30 feet further on, having walked past the mound without giving it a second thought. To the scientists, though, it's an ideal spot for another probe. Nice find, Pretzel says. I'm thinking one on the outside, one inside, Angela says. That'll work, Pretzel replies, joining her by the termite hill. Yana and I lower our backpacks, and the scientists set to work placing the probes. Angela uses a stick to dig away at the side of the mound, exposing the catacomb within. Termites swarm everywhere, even though they hate daylight. Their home is under attack by giants, but it's better those giants are from this world and not another. Pretzel sets the probes, raising the antenna and checking the signal. Angela takes readings, tapping away on the tablet computer. From the bushes behind us comes rustling leaves and the sound of shaking branches. Both Yana and I step away, turning to face the noise, but I'm confused. If there's one thing I've learned in the jungle, it's that you never see or hear an attack coming. Leopards are too smart for that. No, this is something different. A dark, furry hand reaches around a tree trunk, snatching at Yana's backpack as it rests on the track. Hey, put that down, Pretzel yells as a mandrill makes off with one of the sensors, crashing through the foliage. Yana laughs. Baboons are intensely curious, and this one has probably been following us for some time, intrigued by the hairless ones, as Lady would call us. We catch brief glimpses of his plump, bright red ass flashing at us as he rushes through the jungle. Angela shakes her head, laughing. We did not train for this. It's sabotage, Pretzel says, only half serious, laughing and shaking his head at this surprising act of animal theft. Garcia smiles. Well, you wanted a wide variety of readings. We continue along the animal trail. Mud squishes beneath our boots as we move through a shallow marsh at the base of the cliff. There he is, Yana says, pointing. The baboon is sitting on a rock ahead of us, taunting us, apparently figuring out where we're going. He's chewing on the casing, trying to pry open the sensor with his huge canine incisors. A small troop of baboons shelter from the sun beneath the broad trunk of a nearby rainforest giant, towering almost as high as the ragged cliff. Young baboons play among the thick roots, squabbling like children in a schoolyard, while the dominant male is intent on wrecking the sensor, pulling at the plastic casing and trying to pry it apart. Although their fur is dark, mandrills are stunning, with tufts of fawn-colored hair wrapped around their necks like a collar, leading to a goatee beard. With deep-set dark eyes and a slight mohawk, they look like punk rockers after a hard night out. It's their nose that gets the most attention, though, as it's a contradiction of color. Long blue bands span either side of their bright red nostrils. Picasso couldn't have done any better. "Put that down," Pretzel says, hurrying along the track. In response, the baboon starts smashing the sensor on the rocks. "Oh, no, no, no." Garcia says, "Let him have his fun." "Yeah," Yana says, "you really don't want to argue with him." That comment seems to get Pretzel's attention, and he turns back to join us on the path. The baboon continues pounding the sensor, bending its antenna and cracking the case. Angela shrugs. "Don't ask me how, but I'm getting readings from that thing." I think it's hilarious. "We're close," Yana says. As we creep through the undergrowth, there are tiny bats hanging beneath the branches of several broadleaf plants. "Oh, I'm loving this shit," Pretzel says, reaching down beneath the plant and rubbing some grit between his fingers. He's not kidding. He really does. Angela sets up a sensor beneath the bats, positioning it in an area where guano is slowly accumulating. The entrance to the cave is in shadow. Tens of thousands of bats hang from the ceiling, either trying to sleep or madly crawling over each other. "Oh yeah, this is perfect." Pretzel uses a knife to scrape away some of the guano, examining how deep it lies on the cave floor. "Physically, this cave is sheltered, so we wouldn't expect any significant change regardless of the weather. But these bats, I love them. They're our little collectors. What do they eat? Insects? Fruit?" "I guess," I say, not really having thought about it too much. "This is wonderful. These guys will fly easily 50 kilometers each night foraging for food before returning here. They're going to do a lot of our work for us. If there's any microbial impact from the alien presence or the introduction of toxic heavy metals, they're going to inadvertently retrieve samples for us and politely deposit them on the cave floor." I've never seen someone so excited about bat shit. Pretzel and Angela set up 15 monitors throughout the vast cave, far more than we've laid down in any other spot. They position them strategically, with a few right at the back where the vast cave narrows to just a few feet. A stream trickles between the rocks. Garcia climbs up to place a probe on a ledge just below a swarm of bats, becoming ever more agitated by our presence. Pretzel is patient, putting up with bat guano dripping on him. He nestles one of the devices right up by a bunch of sleeping bats. Their fur rubs up against the sensor, but they don't seem to mind. The radio crackles, and we hustle out of the cave, heading back out into the brilliant sunlight. "Sierra Charlie 6, Overlord. Come in. Over." Garcia speaks with deliberate clarity, holding the microphone barely an inch from his lips. "Overlord, this is Sierra Charlie 6. Go ahead." "Sierra Charlie 6, be advised Alpha is on the move. ETA 6 hours. We need to clear civilians from the area. We have Romeo Charlie inbound. I repeat, Romeo and Charlie. Rendezvous at Waypoint Tango 2. Over." "Copy that. Rendezvous at Waypoint Tango 2. Sierra Charlie 6 out." "What's happening?" Pretzel asks. "Your friends are coming down a little early." He looks at his watch. "They're going to make landfall slightly after 7 p.m. tonight." Garcia turns to Yana and me. "Time to wrap this up. We need to get you guys out of here." Okay. We're good," Pretzel says, looking down at his computer display and not realizing Garcia was talking about us, not him. "I would have liked to track a little further east to lay down more sensors, but we've got a pretty good spread as it is, and this cave is brilliant, exactly what we need." "Great," Garcia says somewhat insincerely. He seems preoccupied by the contents of the radio call, although I didn't understand much of it. Romeo? Garcia hoists his backpack and grabs his rifle. Time to move. We trudge through the mud along the edge of a stream coming from the rock pool. Thunder rumbles in the distance, and I'm curious how an alien elevator is going to deal with a tropical storm stretching up tens of thousands of feet. After all, this place isn't called the rainforest for nothing. Hey, look, Angela says, pointing off the track. Our friend the baboon has tired of his stolen property and discarded the sensor. Pretzel steps off the path, kicking at the sensor as he checks information on the tablet. Garcia doesn't look impressed with the delay, but lets it go without complaining. Oh, that reeks, Pretzel says. The baboon has smeared feces all over the device. Angela smiles. Well, you do like your poop. Not quite what I had in mind. Hey, there he is, Yana says, pointing. Much to Pretzel's disgust, the baboon stands at a distance, hurling feces at us. The curiously colored ape is a good shot, and I duck as a clump sails by. Angela takes a short video of the baboon with the camera on her phone. This is definitely one for social media. Garcia laughs from further up the track, well out of range. Either the baboon tires of tormenting us, or his bowels are empty, but he disappears into the foliage. Angela turns the camera on Pretzel, who has a few brown spots on his jacket, and then pans down to the crushed, filthy probe lying beside the track. Oh, you're not going to post that, are you? Angela laughs. $10 million worth of advanced bioscanning tech being road tested on a baboon's ass. What's not to love? Pretzel shakes his head. We continue to the base of the waterfall. Brother Mordecai is sitting on a rock in the sun reading his Bible. Garcia walks over to him and talks softly, pointing at the plateau and then circling his hand in the air. I'm not sure what he's saying, but Mordecai nods and joins our band as we cross the stream and begin climbing over the rocks, watching for dead snakes as we make our way to the animal trail. It doesn't bother you, I hear Angela ask Brother Mordecai, as we move away from the stream and back into the depths of the jungle. The aliens? Mordecai replies, somewhat in surprise. He points up at the thick branches of a kapok tree, stretching over the track some 20 feet up. No more than the leopards. I don't think he's actually pointing at a leopard, but I double-check to be sure. Angela probably hadn't thought about that. I mean, it doesn't worry you that there are beings up there that don't believe in your God? Mordecai is irrepressible. There are plenty of beings down here that don't believe, and that doesn't bother me either. She nods, grinning. I'm walking slightly ahead of her beside Pretzel, and although he doesn't say anything, I notice the exchange isn't lost on him. I think it's a good point. Sometimes we can be too melodramatic. It's the end of the world, and I understand that from both points of view. People like Pretzel think it's the end of the old world and the start of a new, better one. Someone like my dad, though, worries it might be the harbinger of the apocalypse, but I think Brother Mordecai is probably right. For all the change that's coming, there will be plenty of stuff that continues on as it always has. Religion has been pretty resilient to change. Dad thinks that's good. He says we need the social structures and certainty that comes from continuity. I suspect Pretzel and Angela are in the other camp, where they're quite willing to throw everything out and start again. It's surprising to me that Brother Mordecai is somewhere in the middle. I love a challenge, he says. I noticed, Angela replies with a smile. In her mind, she's probably referring back to the debate by the rock pool. Although that may have seemed heated to her, I don't think it bothered Brother Mordecai. That's something I admire in him. Getting angry is easy, but it makes it hard to see clearly. I think the dumbest decisions are made out of pride when people are angry, but perhaps that's just me reflecting on my own hot head. "It's all rather exciting, isn't it?" Mordecai says. "It certainly is," Angela replies, and I can see what Mordecai's doing, breaking down the walls, finding common ground. He's not trying to convert her. I've known him for years. He's genuine in his love for people, regardless of their beliefs. I once saw him give the local witch doctor some antifungal cream, even though he needed it himself, simply because he knew he could always get more when he returned to Kisangani. Going uphill is harder and slower than coming down. Petty Officer Garcia sets a cracking pace. Even though our backpacks are half empty, it's exhausting trying to keep up with him, and he inevitably pulls ahead. Rocks, stones, mud, and tree roots pass under my boots with a steady rhythm. None of us talk much, focusing instead on keeping a good pace. On those few occasions when I look up, which is only as we turn one of the zigzag corners on the track, I catch sight of Garcia at the far end, already tacking back in the other direction. Butterflies flutter through the air, mocking our efforts at climbing around the edge of the cliff. "Is he always like this?" I ask, resting for a moment and leaning forward with my hands on my knees. Sweat drips from Pretzel's brow. "No, he's going easy on us." After 30 minutes, we pass the clearing where the gorillas frolicked in the sun, but they've moved on. I look for Lady, hoping for even a glimpse of Tiny through the dark undergrowth, but the troop has gone foraging. "Do you think we'll see it?" Yana asks as we walk up the track. "I mean, not just on TV, in real life." "I hope so," I say, spotting Garcia through the trees, following the track as it winds toward the top of the hill. I was hoping he'd give us a chance to rest in the clearing, but he's already approaching the plateau. Birds squawk throughout the forest. To me, the jungle's like a crowded train station, full of buskers and passengers, station staff and transit police. Everyone's got something to say, and everyone's saying it at once. Monkeys screech in the treetops, swinging between branches that sag and bend, flexing beneath their weight as they soar through the canopy. The ease with which they move is deceptive. With long, muscular arms and a steady rhythm, they sail into and then out of view in seconds, disappearing into the lush rainforest. Finally, Garcia comes to a halt, standing on the crest of the hill some 50 feet ahead of us. He waves with his hand, wanting us to hurry. Yeah, that's not happening. Cupping his hands so he can be heard over the cacophony of the jungle, he yells, "I can see it! I can see the alien craft!" That gets our attention. Suddenly, the pack on my back feels as light as air. Yana is beside me. She quickens her pace. I look up at Garcia and start to jog, forgetting about the ache in my thighs, excited at the prospect of seeing an alien spaceship hanging from a rope, imagining it looks like a spider dangling from a thin strand of silk. I start to holler with excitement when the world goes deathly silent. I'm not sure how, but the jungle falls quiet in an instant. Beams of light reach through the trees like spotlights shining in the dark. In an instant, the sky beyond Petty Officer Garcia turns white, appearing far brighter than the sun, leaving me looking at what is akin to a freeze frame paused in the middle of a movie. As I'm running up the track, the sight before me is confusing. Nothing moves. I'm moving, but nothing I'm seeing is in motion, even though I know it is. My boots slide on the mud, catching on roots, but the sight before me is as though I'm standing still, which is disorienting. Branches that appear motionless slap me on the face, forcing me to a halt. Squeezing my eyes shut, I shake my head, wanting my vision to clear, but the image imprinted on my retina is overwhelming. Blood-red shapes swirl behind my eyelids. I can still see Garcia, even with my eyes closed, but his outline and that of the forest are seared on my retina as an after-image. Like the photographic negatives of old, white is black, day is night. Rather than being light, the sky beyond him is as dark as coal. It's as though a camera flash has gone off an inch from my nose. A thundering boom shakes the ground, rattling my bones. I blink, rubbing my eyes, still struggling to make out what's happening. A fierce wind swirls around us. Trees flex and sway, all rocking in the same direction, leaning away from base camp, which is still easily a mile off over the hill. Sticks, twigs, and leaves lift into the air, swirling around us, all being drawn in the same direction. What's happening? I turn to face Yana. She's a ghost, barely registering before my eyes, blending in with the vines and branches. Run! That voice. It's Garcia, but I still can't make him out. A hand grabs me, swinging me around and pushing me on. Even with my eyes wide open, I'm struggling to see anything beyond the glaring impression on the back of my eyeball. The noise around us is like that of a jet plane roaring through the sky. Off to the side, I catch the blurred image of the jungle clearing as we run past. Trees sway as though caught in a hurricane. Leaves swirl through the canopy like a heavy snow. On we stumble, half falling as we rush down the track. Run where? I yell as my boots catch on fallen trees I cannot see. Whenever I look directly at anything, I'm blinded by the seething blur in front of me, a red haze seared on my eyes. To each side, I catch vague outlines, but little or no color. Down there! My shoulder slaps saplings and tree trunks as I pull myself on, rushing through the undergrowth, having lost the feel of the track beneath my boots. Branches scratch at my cheeks. The rush of wind is unlike any storm I've ever experienced, but there's no rain. Above us, the jungle canopy reverses direction. Whereas moments ago, all the trees leaned out toward the stream. Now they surge back toward the distant village. Birds tumble through the air, being thrown about within the jungle. I still can't see clearly, but the sky above glows like the sun. Flames lick at the canopy. The ground beneath my boots drops away with each thundering step. Fire lashes the sky. Somehow I've got hold of Yana's hand, or perhaps she grabbed my fingers to pull me on, I'm not sure, but we're crashing through the forest together, flattening saplings and crushing ferns underfoot. Flames rush through the trees, curling around trunks and consuming branches. The heat is intense, scorching the back of my neck. Burning wood and smoldering debris hurl through the air, tumbling end over end. My eyesight improves as the blur before me fades. On we run, racing downhill, with the ground dropping away beneath each plunging step. I'm running so fast I'm in danger of tripping and crashing into trees. The slope increases, and then suddenly it's not there at all. I'm not sure when I realize I'm falling, but my boots are still madly trying to gain traction on a hillside that's no longer beneath me. The spray from the waterfall offsets the scorching heat, sucking the oxygen out of the air. In that instant, we plunge headlong toward the rocks below. I let go of Yana's hand, tumbling over my own boots, catching glimpses of the rock pool racing up to greet us. The cliff face rushes past, but the tens of thousands of water drops cascading down the waterfall seem to hang motionless beside me. It's as though they're suspended in midair, frozen in time, but we are all in motion, plummeting toward the rocks. Flames reflect off the pool, revealing a sky consumed by fire. Pretzel plunges into the water feet first, followed by Angela. I go to hold my breath, but I'm still tumbling, with arms flailing. Desperately trying to right myself, I crash into the pool, landing on my backpack. The wind is knocked out of me by the impact. Rather than feeling like water, it's as though I've landed in a pile of sand. Flames roll over the cliff, rushing down toward me as water sprays outward. Before I can react, I sink into the depths, watching as fire rushes over the surface of the water. I struggle to free myself from my backpack. My boots feel like lead weights. Darkness closes around me. My clothing is heavy, soaked with water, dragging me into the depths. With my lungs screaming for air, I kick, trying to propel myself toward the edge of the rock pool, but my efforts are feeble, and down I go, sinking beneath the water as flames lash the surface, causing it to glow in angry, eerie shades of orange, yellow, and a deep, burning red. Stage 2. Contact. Angela. A hand grabs me, hauling me out of the water, dragging me into the shallows. Garcia staggers, slipping on submerged rocks as he struggles through the waist-deep water by the edge of the rock pool. He's got the collar of my shirt in one hand and a firm grip on Angela's forearm with the other. I cough, bringing up water. Garcia falls to his knees in the loose rocks and sand at the water's edge, but the strength and determination with which he drags us on is astonishing. He leaves the two of us lying in the shallows. My feet bob in the water. Waves lap at my arms as I lie on the decimated beach. Petty Officer Garcia turns away from us, wading back out into the depths. "That's them. That's all of them," Pretzel says from somewhere behind me, and I watch as Garcia sinks to his knees with water lapping at his shoulders. He faces away from us, looking at the waterfall. A fine mist drifts over the pool, but the water is filthy. Ash floats on the surface, mingled with broken branches and burnt wood. The cascading torrent slows to a trickle running down over the rocks. Pretzel grabs me. "You okay, kid? Kid, are you okay?" I nod. Given I just fell down a cliff into a rock pool, I'm doing surprisingly well. Everything aches, but it's bruising, not broken bones my body is complaining about. I'm stiff and sore, but alive. Brother Mordecai is sitting on a boulder, rocking back and forth, mumbling. Long, straggly, wet hair hangs over his face, hiding his eyes. He's staring down at his trembling hands. I want to say something, but everything's wrong. And it's not just him. Yana is wandering among the smoldering ruins of the jungle. She's lost in every sense of the word. Trees lie piled on top of each other, having all fallen in the same direction, lying before us like dominoes. Torn roots, clumps of dirt, rocks, boulders, nothing is as it was. Smoke rises from scorched branches, curling as it drifts on the breeze. Above the cliff, a dark cloud lifts into the air, billowing and enfolding on itself, rising tens of thousands of feet in a column of smoke. It's the silence that troubles me. No birds singing, no monkeys yelling, no insects calling. The silence of the jungle screams in pain. Pretzel drags Angela away from the water's edge. She's not breathing. He rolls her over, clearing her airway and pushing 2 fingers hard against her neck. No pulse. Initially he panics, looking around for help from the others, but no one races to his side. "I don't have a pulse. Nothing. Nothing at all." Water dribbles from her lips. "No, no, no." Pretzel lies Dr. O'Brien on her back. Rather than reacting and becoming frantic, he's methodical, slowing himself down, calming himself. I can see his training kicking in. He positions one palm over the other and interlocks his fingers, placing his hands with precision just up from her sternum, and begins cardiopulmonary resuscitation. I'm in shock. It's not that I've never seen CPR. Dad had me do a first aid course back in Boston. We had dummies, just a naked upper torso with a bland, generic head. But this is different. The speed and rhythm with which Pretzel moves is bewildering. All around us, there's nothing but devastation. Smoke wafts from the ruins of the jungle. Fires reach up into the sky, but there's no life. Nothing's moving. And yet there he is, thrusting up and down, hitting a rapid pace, far quicker than anything I did during my training. Pretzel is pushing hard, rising straight up and then driving down, using his body weight, not just his arms. Angela's chest compresses back and forth, depressing by easily a third, which is alarming to see, as it seems as though he's crushing her lungs. For a thin, aging scientist, he's astonishingly strong. "Come on, Ange," he says. Bones crack under his relentless pounding, but he refuses to let up. I drag myself out of the water, pulling myself up on my knees and crawling to the opposite side of Dr. O'Brien. Her blue eyes stare up at the sky without blinking. "Garcia!" Pretzel calls out, quickly switching, pinching Angela's nose and providing 2 deep breaths before returning to CPR. He looks to the rock pool. "Garcia, I need you. Enrico, Petty Officer Enrico Garcia, can you hear me?" Garcia doesn't move. Water ripples around him, but he stays still, with his back to us. The hair on his head has been burnt off, leaving his skin blackened and peeling. Cuts and scratches line his neck. "Please,